Hey folks, welcome back to Money and Politics, and I suppose I should say welcome back myself. And I'm going to talk some stocks today, but first I'm going to start by going over why I haven't been doing videos for a while. I'd have to look. It's probably been 2 weeks or so. I didn't look. So here's the thing. The short of it is I'm running for Congress in a district in Illinois. I'm running on the Republican ticket. The fellow who was representing the district, who's a friend of mine, I have friends on both sides of the aisle from having covered Congress and covering Illinois public policy and politicians for the better part of 30 years. My friend was redistricted. Every 10 years, as you probably know, they redraw the political boundaries, and they redistricted the fellow who was the congressman for the district I am in, and he is no longer in it. And I kept waiting to see, well, who's going to run now if some of the other people who were Republicans were elected to the state legislature would decide to instead run for Congress. And while I waited, no one stepped up. There were some other people who had registered who had not run before. And so finally at the last moment, since there was no incumbent, and I think it's going to be a big Republican year, and I was really concerned about the direction the country is going in on a host of issues, both domestic and international, that I decided to run. And here in Illinois, you have to go out to get on the ballot and get the signatures of so many voters in the district. Excuse me, eyes are dry from stuff. So many voters in the district. So all of a sudden what I had to do is, get in the game and run out and get those signatures. And I didn't know if I was going to make it, in part because then we were getting snow. And just as the one snow melted, that was about a foot, we had another snow. And there was one day I was out trying to collect signatures in a parking lot at a strip mall, and the winds were blowing about 30 miles an hour, which, people understandably didn't want to be accosted on the parking lot. They just wanted to get in their car to get out of the wind. So that's what I've been doing. And we filed the petitions. We got more than we needed, and we filed on Monday of this week. It seems like about 2 weeks ago that happened. So since Monday evening, starting Tuesday, I finally had a chance to then catch up on some other things, as well as having to then start the process of putting a campaign together and getting a website up and stuff. I don't even have the website up as yet. I was probably the last one to jump in this race for the reasons I explained. I kept waiting to see if someone else was going to get in, and they didn't. So, I created Money in Politics. I thought I was going to actually be a little bit more political when I started this a year ago, this channel. I'm going to start a different channel for my campaign. I don't think a lot of you come here for political commentary, and you're not, many of you are from around the world as well as around the country. So I'm not going to use this as a platform for my campaign. I'm going to start a different channel for that. But at least I wanted to, number one, explain why I was just all of a sudden up against the wall and too busy to basically do anything other than scramble to get these signatures. So that's what I was doing. And I'm still going to try to get some videos out on a somewhat of a regular basis, maybe not every day like I had been doing before I got in this race, but try not to have the big lapse that I just had. But that was a particular deadline. By the way, the deadline for the primary this year in Illinois, and they changed it from previous years, the deadline for the primary election is June 28, And so if I am the Republican nominee for Congress, then I would be running until the November election. Otherwise, it would be over at the end of June. So people say, why do you want to run? And I explained in one place where I gave a speech, I said, I don't want to run, but the guys who landed on the shores of Normandy in World War II didn't want to be there either, but they fought for America, and because they fought for America, we're free. So knowing what I know, I've spent 30 years on these issues. I know the lay of the land. I've covered Congress in Washington. It's as if I've spent 30 years preparing to be in Congress. And given my concerns for the country where we are now, you look at what happened with the withdrawal in Afghanistan. You look at the oil cutback and what that's doing to middle-class families with gas. The other day here, it was $4.60 a gallon. And for people who were barely getting by before, when they were paying, $2.50 a gallon, this is crushing. We have the food inflation. I mean, it's going to be where people can barely buy enough food to feed their families and have enough money left to put gas in the car to drive to work. If you're a wealthy family, it's an inconvenience. If you're not a wealthy family, this is crushing. And the one thing that I will say, and one of the reasons why I wanted to have this channel, I want America to always have a strong middle class. Because that's what makes it, in my mind, that's what makes us America. I'm happy when people become very wealthy. I hope you all become very wealthy. But what makes us really strong as a nation is that middle class. And as I have said, if we become a nation where there's only a few who are rich and many who are poor, then we're no longer the United States. Then we're Guatemala. We're like many other countries where there's just a few who have money. The point of America is that anyone can come here, and you may not be rich in terms of having millions of dollars, but the average person lives tremendously well in America with a roof over their head, indoor plumbing, running water, electricity, cell phones, cable TV. And people don't think of themselves as being rich, but when you compare yourself to the lifestyles of many people around the world, you are. I hope prosperity extends not only across America, but around the world. I think capitalism is great. You need some regulations, but the art, as I've said to other people outside of this channel, the art of governing, in my mind, from having covered it, isn't like an on-off switch where you go yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. It's more like a rheostat where you have to find the right level of regulation, the right level of taxation. Too much kills the economy. Too much regulation kills the economy. But you want to have it set right. And you don't want a society where you have no regulation. Anyway, I've gone on longer than I intended to about that, and I apologize. So that's where I was. That's why I'm running, and except for just telling you now, I'm not planning on using this platform for campaigning. I'm going to be talking, as I have been over the year, to cover some stocks. Now, let's take a look at some things. InMode remains one of my favorite stocks, and I think this is an example. You can see here we got a 5-day chart. It's done well. Over 6 months, not so well. It topped out back in November, and where it was almost $100. So it's been cut in half, but of course, we've had all kinds of things that have been going wrong in the world. And, when you compare our stocks going down to what's happening in Ukraine, I mean, it kind of puts life in perspective. So InMode, I think, is a great buy. And if we look at the earnings, look at the right here. Let me get myself out of the picture. These green dots, the green is that in each case over the last 4 quarters, they have topped expectations, and often by quite a lot. So, you know, as a reminder, this is a company that is in the beauty management, you might say. It's like having improving your looks, almost like having plastic surgery, but without having to go under the knife. And this is what they're doing. I think that kind of a product, that kind of a service is always going to be in demand. There are a lot of people who will cut back on other things, but they want to look good. They'll put a lot of money into that. And we see that in the cosmetics industry. So InMode making good money and doing very well. Another thing that's been doing very well, which I chose a year ago, this past November. So I began buying this in November of 2020, right about the time of the election, when it was announced that we had the vaccine coming for COVID. I expected that the world economy would reopen and that oil would be going up of necessity. I did not at that time anticipate what's going on with Russia invading Ukraine, which has obviously caused problems. I did know that Joe Biden was going to be coming in and would be bad for oil. But anyway, we see DIG, which is 2 times leveraged index on oil, and that is the chart for 6 months. That's a chart for a year. So it also split 2 for 1, just to quickly review some of these prices. Something that I had talked about before, but probably not very much. This is ETN, FNGU. And that's a month chart. If we look at year to date, it's been down. But this is the one where if you go down and look on the right side here, you get all kinds of really mostly very good companies. I'm not a big Twitter fan as a company. I don't say that for political reasons. I say it just for business reasons. But you do have, as an example, NVIDIA in here, as you can see. Netflix, which is, you know, a lot of these companies of late, Baidu, which is a Chinese company. But it's been not bad. Speaking of oil, whoops, somebody had asked me what if I had any inclination on what to buy relative to commodities. I was doing some research, a little bit of research. Like I said, I've been kind of busy. But relative to commodities, I have not yet picked it, but I would recommend some commodities. I wouldn't go hog wild, but I think obviously we have inflation. I saw the inflation coming. I was concerned about the Fed because they were taking their eye off the ball about a year ago, which concerned me, and now we see it. But let me go back to what I was going to say here on, speaking of oil. This is a 3x leveraged exchange traded note, NRGU. You know, DIG is much less. But this is $373. It has done very well over the last year. And remember, this is where oil was before, back in December 2019, before it fell out of bed because of COVID. And you're seeing that chart here. So this puts the price of the oil and NRGU in some context. As the world still has to reopen, it's reopened to some extent. It is continuing to reopen. We still don't have a lot of things burning oil as they had been burning it, consuming it before. We don't know what the oil supply. It's very doubtful that President Biden will reverse course on fossil fuels. I think he should. but I don't think he will, which means that oil supplies are going to remain tight as the world economy reopens. And therefore, you want, in my estimation, have some presence on oil. But instead of just buying an oil company, which you can do, I like the indexes, whether DIG or in this case, NRGU. And if we go down here, and again, let me take myself out so we can kind of see what the holdings are. You can see here in one fell swoop, you're buying shares of Chevron, ConocoPhillips, Hess, Marathon, Occidental Petroleum, Phillips 66, etc. You have 10 different companies with 10% each. So this is an equally weighted exchange traded note, and it has been doing very well indeed. Let me see if I can find here. Let's bring this up. And so if we make this let's say a 2-year chart, oil before the last 2 years was not doing very well. But I'm going to go up here in the left-hand column and see if we put in it compared to the leveraged S&P 500, which is the UPRO, UPRO. And let's do that, and we'll change the color up here, and we'll make that yellow. So what we see is over 2 years, you can see how the NRGU has really outperformed the leveraged S&P 500. Now, S&P, obviously, until the fall here, we had a sell-off as of about just around Christmas time, and I think that'll come back. So what you really see, though, over this 2-year chart is just how the NRGU has grown. So I would not buy the NRGU and hold it indefinitely. I think this is a conditional hold, and my idea is that I'm playing the reopening of the world economy, and I'm playing the shortage, the oil shortage, as we see, which has driven prices up at the pump. You have two reasons why there is inflation around, and I say this as an investor, why you want to know. One is the Fed has been pumping too much money. Actually, you got more than two. So that's monetary policy. The Fed controls the money supply. The Fed has increased the money supply by 40% over the last 2 years. That is almost unheard of to do that. I just frankly can't remember another period of time when the Fed opened up the spigot on the money supply and pumped that much money into the system in such a short amount of time. The Fed is creating money out of thin air. And so in that way, they are like a counterfeiter. It's why we don't have counterfeiters, because if you just had a bunch of money going in that was unregulated, paper money being printed, it undermines the value of the currency. And that's frankly what the Fed is doing. And one of the reasons, therefore, that we have price inflation is because the money supply increased. You have also fiscal policy. Fiscal policy, unlike monetary policy, this is basic stuff, but many people still don't know the difference. Fiscal policy is what either the President of the United States does with Congress, raising taxes or lowering taxes, spending bills, that's all fiscal policy. Same thing at the state level. Well, because of COVID, we were spending as a nation, both under Trump and then Biden, these massive, massive spending bills, and for allegedly COVID relief and different things, as you know, that added to inflation. So you had very questionable fiscal policy at the same time that the Fed trying to, I mean, with good intentions, they wanted to counteract the impact of COVID so that the economy wouldn't collapse. I understand their intent, but we had this massive increase. And then in my estimation, where the Fed went wrong is they didn't apply, they didn't raise rates fast enough when they should have. They should have started raising interest rates, which were at historic lows and have been since the big crash of 2008. they really kept the interest rates too low for too long, I think. We had Wednesday, speaking of that, this I'm recording on Friday, the 18th of March. On Wednesday, they had an increase of 1/4 point. The Fed will probably increase 1/4 point repeatedly throughout this year. I said the other day it could happen about 5 times. It could happen more. But I think 5 is probably a pretty good guess. They're going to be not wanting to increase interest rates in their mind too much too soon. So I think they're going to be incrementalist about that. We do need interest rates to go up. I said that before. Otherwise, we're going to have runaway inflation. But keep that in mind. As I said before, if you're going to go out and buy a car, buy a house or something, I said probably back in January and December, you should be doing that ASAP. Because the historic rate of over the last 75 years or so, folks, the real normal rate of interest that you pay when you borrow is going to be between 5 to 8%. You could maybe say 4 to 8%. But we've been doing, below 4%. We've been having, say, mortgages and all down at 3% for a while there. So it's really been out of the norm, and the pendulum has to come back. So those are some of the fiscal policy and the monetary policy. And then the other thing is the reason that oil is going up so much, speaking of NRGU, is because the world buys oil in dollars. And one of the things there that is troubling, I wanted to throw in the TQQ, which has also been good. And by the way, I think when the market goes down, as it has, as you know, that is a good time to be buying some additional shares of TQQ. So the TQQ goes down in market downturns. We can see how it has come down from almost $100 a share. Actually, that's almost $200 a share back in the middle of November. But we had a split in there anyway. The point is, you can see the chart in red of the TQQQ, and that's the 3 times leverage version of the NASDAQ 100. I think this is a reasonable time to buy. You don't have to put all your money in at one time. You could incrementally buy this, but I would encourage you to think about taking a position in the TQQ at this time. When we look at, let me go to a 5-year chart for a minute. You can see back in this area when COVID came out, and just going back exactly 2 years ago, we had this sharp drop-off. Now, I say that because when the market's down, you don't feel like buying. But if you had bought when we had the short drop-off, and sometimes it's good to stand back and let it fall and then see when it starts to come back up. And if it comes back up for a week, maybe like this week, where this week, as I said on Twitter earlier in the day, the stocks had posted their best week since 2020. But if you look at this chart here, you can see how it came up off of that low part in back in almost exactly where we are, March of 2020. And then look at the run that the TQQQ had over the following almost 2 years, a year and 9 months, until we got to middle of November. Obviously down from that time for a variety of reasons that I don't want to go into right now, but you can see the chart, and that's what I wanted to say. Well, listen, because I went so long explaining that I was running for Congress, I'm already up to 25 minutes, which I apologize for doing. But it's been good. I apologize again for not being in touch with you. I didn't know I was going to be gone for that long. It was never my intention to say I'm going to take off and not do any more videos. I thought I could, but obviously it was very busy there. We had to get the signatures, and it wasn't easy, as I already explained. And if I didn't get the signatures, I wouldn't be on the ballot, so I was facing a real hard deadline on that. If you want to write to me, that's the email where you can write. If you don't already follow me on Twitter, you can follow me on Twitter at this strange concoction of a Twitter handle, Money and Almost Politics, but you drop the C and put in the number 2. That's something that Twitter invented. And that's it, folks. It's Friday. Hope you had a wonderful St. Patrick's Day. Hope you are going to have a wonderful weekend. At least we, for St. Patrick's Day, got some green in the market. And as I said, the best week since 2020, with the S&P up about 6% this week. The Dow was up about 5.5%. And the NASDAQ, the TQQ, don't forget, is 3 times leveraged version of the NASDAQ. The NASDAQ was up 8.2% this week, which means the TQQ is up much more. That's why I recommend it. Folks, I want you to tell me what you think, if you want, about me running for Congress. And again, I'm not going to use this platform to talk politics to you. If you want to get my take on the issues, I'll let you know in a subsequent video what my campaign, my YouTube channel for my campaign is, and I will offer my thoughts on what is going on around the world, international issues, political issues, monetary issues, and you can follow me there if you wish, and if you don't, you can stay here and we'll talk stocks. In the meantime, thanks. Thank you. A number of people wrote while I was not posting and saying, are you okay? Is everything all right? And I appreciate those thoughts and comments. And again, my apologies. 1, for not posting. 2, for going so long tonight, explaining why I was running. Thanks, folks. Have a great weekend, and we will see you, hopefully, in the near future. Until then, take care.